Hi everyone. Before we dive into this week's Music with the Maestro, I wanted to let you know that there are even more ways to listen to great music by the musicians of Baltimore Choral Arts. This Saturday, May the 2nd at 6 p.m. on WBJC Radio, there will be a broadcast of the full performance of our Monteverdi 1610 Vespers concert on their Music with Maryland program. I'll be talking about this monumental work beforehand with Jonathan Pilevsky, and then you'll hear the glorious sounds of Peabody musicians, the Washington Cornet and Sackbut Ensemble, and Baltimore Choral Arts as we explore this dynamic music. Here's a taste of what you're in for. Hello and welcome to another episode of Music with the Maestro. I'm Anthony Blake Clark, Music Director of Baltimore Choral Arts Society, and this week, once again, I'm certainly not I have as one of my guests, Marin Alsop, and of course she needs no introduction because she is definitely a hometown hero for us in Baltimore. But in case you've been living under a rock, she is the Music Director of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra and also the Vienna Radio Symphony Orchestra. So welcome, Marin. Thank you very much for being here with me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's good to see you, even virtually.
Virtually is better than Aaron, we're going to talk some about Bernstein's Mass. But before we dig into the music, I just want to ask you, what have you been doing at this time? And what advice do you have for younger musicians and conductors and composers to stay productive and make this strange experience meaningful in some way?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all probably feel a compulsion to try to get a lot of work done because, and guilty if we don't. So I've been vacillating between, studying scores and working on my German and et cetera, et cetera. And also then the other end of the spectrum, really just taking some time to think about the future, to think about how we will exist in the world as artists, the importance of music to our society and what we want and what we think that will look like in the future. So I would say, just take every day as it comes, and there'll be some days that you can get a lot accomplished, and there'll be some days that you can get a lot accomplished inherently, within. A lot of thinking about what kind of world you want to emerge to, what kind of citizen of that world you want to be. So those are the things I'm thinking about.
Wonderful advice, thank you. So the question, what's on your desk right now?
Oh, ask the question one more time, Blake.
What is sitting on your desk right now? What are you working on music?
Oh, let's see. Well, at the moment it's just German because I had a German lesson this morning. But I have several pieces on the Radiator. That's my holding place by Hans Werner Henze. I'm doing a series of works by him with the Radio Orchestra in Vienna. So I'm marking those, and another big work by Mark Anthony Turnage called Blood on the Floor. It's for a jazz ensemble and orchestra. So I'm doing a lot of sort of looking forward, but then of course I've got my Mahler and my Stravinsky Rite of Spring right here as well.
Excellent. Sounds great. So let's go on to the Mass. So I only really started to delve into this work last week on your recommendation, and it's a totally genre-bending piece, isn't it? I mean, it has a marching band, it has a full symphony, it has a rock band, 3 choirs, a soloist that's sort of the star. Is it classical? Is it blues? Is it theater? Is it sort of folky rock? I mean, what is this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the that was the challenge when it first came out, and probably still remains the challenge that it defies being categorized. And I would say that in that um, defying, it really comes to embody Leonard Bernstein, who really defied to be categorized. He was, he was a great composer. He was a great conductor. He was a great thinker. He was a great speaker. He was a great educator. He was a great TV. There were so many aspects that as soon as you thought, oh, that's what he is, he just morphed into something else. And I think it's appropriate that this huge work of his, I look at it as his Mahler 8. It's really a pinnacle work. That embodies all of his philosophical thinking about society, about the world, and his incredibly eclectic grasp of every genre of music. The thing that I find about it is that it has all of those elements, rock and blues and jazz and classical and 12-tone music even, but it doesn't sound derivative to me at all. It has its own language, which is a language of embrace. So it's really, while it seems kind of overwhelming at first, it's really a very, very simple piece, and it's about inclusion. And this is a perfect inclusion, unity, self-exploration, maybe what I was just talking about, taking the time to really figure out who you are in these days. So, that's the stage. You can only imagine in the early 70s what the reaction to this piece was. I mean, it's even today, it's a little bit, wow.
Well, actually, I was going to ask you about that, about the reaction to it at the time, because of course it was premiered in 1971 for the opening of the Kennedy Center, and it was commissioned by Jackie Kennedy, and President Nixon was advised not to go. And actually, we're going to listen to a 30-second clip of his chief of staff advising him about this.
The reason you should not go the other is that what it is this mass written by Leonard Bernstein. Oh, shit, I know. Which is very, very bad, and maybe really bad. I mean, it's very depressing. Our priest here read it, and so that he said definitely you should not go to it, but it has some political overtones to it. It's very depressing. It's a sort of everything's gone wrong kind of thing. And that it just would be very inappropriate for the president to attend.
Well, can we get a positive story out of it by getting the job where you understand about where we announce?
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating, isn't it? That I think, the fact that Bernstein was under surveillance by the FBI for most of his life because of his outspoken political views, which don't seem terribly outrageous to us today, but also the fact that he was someone who really stood up for what he believed in, and uh, so everyone came to this premiere with, I think, trepidation or a preconception or something, some kind of baggage anyway. I think it's fascinating that Jackie Kennedy wanted Bernstein to write the opening piece for the Kennedy Center in her husband's honor. And, he starts to think, well, what about JFK is truly unique? He was the only Roman Catholic president. So he takes Mass, the Catholic Mass, and uses it as a vehicle, really, to embed all of these questions about faith, about unity, about tolerance, about love, about war, about peace, about protest, um, and I think, about authenticity. And I just think it's a brilliant idea. So he uses the different sections of the Mass as almost chapters in this journey of the celebrant, who's the um, priest, of course, in the Mass, and how he goes from a very simple blind devotion and blind belief system, and then is challenged by external people and forces, and he's forced to really reconsider everything that he had just blindly believed in. And it's really his journey to self-awareness and to some kind of resolution. And that resolution, I think, can be somewhat open-ended, depending on who you are and how you interpret the piece. But there is a real sense of comfort, I think, and arrival by the end of the piece.
Absolutely. So we're going to just listen to a couple of different sections. Of course, I'd love to listen to the whole thing with you, but it's almost 2 hours long, so we won't be able to do that today, maybe someday. But there are two specific moments that you wanted to zero in on. Let's talk first about the Agnus Dei and the Dona Nobis section. And let's talk about it first before we listen so that we know what to listen for. So what's going on here?
Yeah, so this is the part in the journey. This is really kind of we're arriving at the apex of the piece, which is it's almost like the mad scene, when you arrive, that the celebrant is pushed, and question, why do we believe in one God? Why not in 50 gods? Why do we believe in this? What, all these things, pushing. And finally, even the choir, who are his, devoted followers, even the choir in the Dona Nobis steps out and they start saying, why, Dona Nobis, they start just speaking for themselves and questioning. And this leads into his absolutely brilliant cathartic breakdown, where all the words in Latin morph into words in English, morph into words in Hebrew, and all the themes from the piece come back. I mean, it's absolutely brilliantly put together. But this is the build-up to that arrival point.
Great. Let's take a quick listen.
Worthy, Lord. Corpus Cali
striking to me about that section is it seems like it's kind of a riot scene, and it's kind of, what do we want? Peace. When do we want it now? Kind of thing. And it's really interesting, just that demand of Dona nobis pacem. Why are we not satisfied, and how can we be satisfied with our world? And we're demanding something. We're demanding peace, and it's funny to demand peace. And the other thing that I thought when I was listening to that just for the first time last week was how interesting it is that there's a certain amount of improv that's written in the score in this sort of mad time when everything's percolating. It's so interesting.
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple of things to say. I think that you have to remember the time that it was written. This is the time really just when all the protests against the Vietnam War were, still percolating, and when protest, I think, first found, at least in the United States, really first found its feet. So protest is it's the method by which people are heard. What's interesting to me is that, thinking about it in today's terms, I'm not sure protest, it might have been social media today, and now everything's so fragmented. I'm not even sure if there's one single vehicle. But for 1970, 1971, protest was important. It was also a unifying force, which I think was very, very important. But I love the fact that the Latin text, Dona nobis pacem, Dona nobis pacem, which is something that you generally implore the Lord with. Instead, you're now demanding from everyone around you.
Mm-hmm. Wow, incredible. And the next little section that we want to listen to with you is the Almighty Father chorale. So sort of frame this conclusion of the work for us.
So this chorale occurs for the first time early in the piece, after the celebrant sings this very simple, it's called Simple Song about God. And it's really the words, Almighty Father, incline thy ear. And he speaks about, sorry, I don't remember the text exactly, but he says, bless all of us here. And there's a sense of place and community and unity to me. And when it comes back at the end, after this whole huge explosion and journey, it has a completely different sense. I mean, it's the same thing when you perform a masterpiece, and in the exposition, all these materials come out. By the time they come back in the recapitulation, they've been entirely transformed. And what you maybe thought was something just in passing, it becomes something much more important. So it's interesting because I have a little fragment from the Mass framed behind me, and I think about the piece almost every day when I step to my desk, and I think it's a good thing for me to remember every day.
Wow, that's so cool. And also, as a listener who's interested in choral music, something that strikes me at the end of this piece is it's a little bit like the conclusion of a Bach cantata, where all these things have happened, and then at the end there's this wonderfully simplistic chorale. Of course, in his time, it might have even been sung by the congregation, and that's what the Almighty Father chorale makes me think of, is this
Yes
thing at the very end of an experience where we're all sort of together and we've shared something. It might mean different things to each of us, but we've shared something together. It's a really powerful moment.
Yeah, and I like what you're pointing out, especially about there's ritual in it, and there's tradition as well, and that binds us, of course, as the human race.
Absolutely. Let's listen to that really quickly.
Mass has ended. Go in peace.
It's just amazing to me that at the end of this piece, the thing that keeps being pointed to is peace and the work of achieving peace. It's a really powerful way to end such a monstrous work.
Yeah, but you know, these aspirational goals are so important and so elusive. I think it's much easier to focus on, you know, greedy gathering, you know, you focus on getting rich or focus on, I mean, it's much easier to do that than focus on peace, you know, because it's such a difficult, but yet ultimately, if we could all embrace that idea, what kind of world will we have? I mean, I'm particularly struck by um, this moment in time and how our planet has suffered so much under our, um, I just think it's neglect. I don't think it's intentional, but just neglect. And how somehow this virus, which is born out of nature, is somehow it got us to stop polluting in the same degree and with the same intensity. And I really believe that it's a moment to step back and respect the natural world and understand that we're not, we're just given this great privilege of taking care of the planet. We're not the masters of this. So, I mean, that's what I hear now at the end of the Bernstein Mass. Of course, when I first did the piece, that never occurred to me.
But it is a testament to the piece that there's relevancy always. And there's something that you can grab from good art that speaks to it, to our time now, and points back to the time that it was created. So I think it's
Definitely.
a whole thing
Mm-hmm.
to listen to in this time. So we will put the performance in the comments of this video so that our audience can listen to the whole thing. They've got an hour and 48 minutes.
Wonderful. Super.
And one of the other reasons why you want to talk about this is because actually a new performance with you conducting is coming up. Can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, on May 15th on Great Performances, I think it is on PBS, uh, the production that I did with the Chicago Symphony at the Ravinia Festival, where I'm the chief conductor now, will air. So I hope everybody can see that. The celebrant in this performance is Brazilian singer, wonderful singer-actor Paulo Schott, and it's pretty spectacular. I'm proud of it. I only wish Lenny could have seen it.
Oh yes, of course. Well, maybe he is seeing it.
We can hope.
Performance. So we will definitely look out for that. And of course, Baltimore Choral Arts and I are wonderfully excited about next season with you and doing a Mozart Requiem performance together, and of all the amazing music that's going around us right now. Speaking of, the Baltimore Symphony is doing their podcast, their off-the-cuff podcasts, and I think actually we're on last Tuesday's episode. So don't miss out on the Baltimore Symphony off-the-cuff podcasts. If you missed last week's Music with the Maestro with Simon Halsey talking about Benjamin Britten, you can go to our website and to our Facebook page and see it. And next week, we'll have Simon Carrington, one of the co-founders of the King Singers, and we're going to talk about Thomas Tallis. So don't miss those things. Marin Alsop, thank you so much for having this awesome conversation with me.
My pleasure, Blake.
It's a delight, and what an experience for me to get to talk with you about this. So thank you so much for being here.
Great. Take care, everybody.